Hello, this is Captain Chaudhari. Today I am going to speak about Rule 19 Colregs and Section 1. Section 1 is to be applied in any condition of visibility. For example, in good visibility when the vessels are in sight of one another, and restricted visibility as well. When we talk about rule number 5, that is lookout, 6 safe speed, and the other rules like 7 and 8, there is no much problem. You would use the principles in good visibility as well as poor visibility. But when it comes to rule number 9 or 10, I think there is some amount of gray area. Like 19C, it says that every vessel shall have due regard to the prevailing conditions of visibility when complying with rules of section 1 of this part. Rule number 5 is lookout. Every vessel shall maintain at all times a proper lookout by sight and hearing as well as by all available means appropriate in prevailing circumstances, so as to make a full appraisal of the situation and risk of collision. The lookout person should be briefed that he should keep a lookout not only by sight but also by hearing. He is supposed to be aware that the direction of incoming signal may considerably change because of refraction. It is very important to sight a vessel in restricted visibility. He has to be told that the fog can, sometimes it becomes dense, sometimes it rarefies. He can be given binocular, he can be given walkie-talkie, and he has to be told how important it is that without losing any time, the moment he sights a vessel, it should be told to the bridge. All available means everything that is available in order to make an accurate assessment of the situation. For example, radar, ARPA, VHF, AIS, NAVIGs, Recon, navigational warning, etc. Everything that is available which can help you to make a better assessment of the situation should be used. So rule number 19B is something like a gist of rule number 6 or repetition of rule number 6. But one extra and very important point that is focused here, that the power-driven vessel, it's mandatory for a power-driven vessel to have her engines ready for immediate maneuver. Rule number 6 is safe speed. It says that every ship shall at all times proceed at a safe speed so that she can take proper and effective action and be stopped within a distance appropriate to the prevailing circumstances and conditions. Or restricted visibility. Depending on the visibility, their speed is such that they can either take appropriate action or if required, they stop and yet they would not collide. Now in determining the safe speed, all the vessels should take following factors into account. And the first factor is state of visibility. That is how section 1 is closely connected to rule number 19. Then traffic density, including the concentration of fishing vessels and other vessels. The maneuverability of the vessels, with special reference to the turning ability and stopping distance. In night, the presence of background lights such as shore lights or backscatter of your own light. Draft in relation to the available depth of water is also a very important consideration. Additionally, by the ships fitted with operational radar, the factors which should be considered are characteristic, efficiency and limitation of the equipment, the constraint imposed by the radar range scale in use, possibility that small objects, floating ice, etc. are not detected by the radar at adequate range. The number, location and movement of the vessels which are detected by radar and the effect on radar detection of the weather elements. These are the factors which should be considered by the ships fitted with operational radar. Rule number 7 is risk of collision. In its first paragraph, it says that every vessel shall use all available means appropriate in prevailing circumstances and condition. Now, it says condition, but it is implied that condition of restricted visibility to determine if risk of collision exists, and if there is any doubt, such risk shall be deemed to exist. Now, in restricted visibility, it is possible that because of the radar equipment that is being used, there might be a difference in determining whether there is risk of collision compared to a good visibility, where physically you are able to see the ship. So, it is possible that there is a doubt whether the risk of collision exists or not. So, rule says that if you have any doubt, such risk shall be deemed to exist. B says that proper use of radar equipment should be made. Long range scanning, radar plotting, etc. must be done. The idea is you get early warning of any risk of collision. It is recommended that you have both the radars on. One radar could be on 6 miles, 3 miles, etc. or smaller scales. The other radar could be on 12 miles and intermittently it could be put on 24 mile scale. The idea is you do the early detection, systematic plotting, and you have an exact idea what the target is doing, and probably take the avoiding action, maybe before 6 miles, before the target enters the 6 mile scale. Now the rule goes on to say that assumptions shall not be made on the basis of scanty information, particularly the scanty radar information. Such a risk shall be deemed to exist when compass bearing of an approaching vessel does not appreciably change. Such risk may still exist, particularly when approaching a large vessel or a vessel at close range, for example a towing vessel. Like I typically ask the candidates, like if there is a towing vessel, right, and the towing vessel is on port side and it is not restricted in the ability to maneuver, you as a powered vessel, how will you monitor her bearing? Which part of the towing vessel the bearing should be taken? So the answer is, like, if the bearings are closing in, the towing vessel is crossing ahead of you, then you better take the bearing of the aft part of the tow. Whereas if the bearings are opening out, then you should take the bearing of the foremost part of the towing vessel. The idea is the candidate must know, like, it shouldn't happen that the towing vessel is clearing ahead of you and the tow is clearing astern of you. So even if the bearings are changing appreciably, the risk may still exist in case of a large vessel, towing vessel, or a vessel at close range. Rule number 8 is action to avoid collision. Paragraph A says that if any action is taken to avoid collision in accordance with the rules of this part, then if the circumstances of the case admit, be positive, made in ample time, and with due regard to the observance of good seamanship. Now let us consider the situation in restricted visibility when Rule 19D is applied. You will not alter a small amount like 5 degrees, 7 degrees, 10 degrees, initially 5 degrees, then make it 10 degrees. No, it should be made positively. Positive indication should be there. Say an alteration of something like 30 degrees to starboard, so that it is apparent to the other vessel, it is positive, and it should be made in good time, not at the last moment. And observance of good seamanship is important. Like, you should not only see what is your action, you should also try and see what in the given circumstances, given a region where the other vessel is, what is the possible action that other vessel is likely to take. Is there any problem about a shallow patch on her starboard side? Is it possible that the other vessel, instead of altering the course to starboard, would reduce the speed? All these factors must be considered. They come under observance of good seamanship. Any alteration of the course should be readily apparent to the other vessel, observing visually or by operational radar. A succession of small alterations shall be avoided. Because if the alteration is done in restricted visibility, I tell the boys that any alteration less than 25 degrees is not so good an alteration. Like, if you have sufficient sea room, why not alter at least by 25 degrees, so that it is readily apparent to the other vessel, observing by radar. Let us consider a situation that a vessel detects another vessel on her radar, say 2 points on starboard bow, about 6 miles off. Now the thing is, ideal action would be both the vessels alter to their starboard. But what happens with this vessel, right? There is a shallow patch on the starboard side and there is a vessel right astern, or maybe on a starboard quarter very close, say about half a mile off. It is impossible to alter course to starboard and it is not safe to even reduce the speed. Now the question is, can I alter my course to port? So in 19D it says that so far as possible the following shall be avoided: alteration of the course to port for a vessel forward of the beam, except for the vessel being overtaken. So in this particular case, the question that is asked is, can I alter course to port? So here is the answer. What is the answer? If there is sufficient sea room, alteration of the course may be the best action, provided that it does not result in another close quarter situation. So, am I permitted to alter course to port? Probably yes, if it is done in good time. Probably yes, because there is sufficient sea room on port side. Probably yes, because there is no possibility of close quarter situation on the port side. And of course, if it is a bold alteration done in good time. Action taken to avoid collision with another vessel should result in passing of a safe distance, and effectiveness of such action should be carefully checked until the other vessel is finally passed and clear. Now this is very, very important in restricted visibility, where the lookout or the position of other vessel is restricted on the radar. You cannot see the vessel visually. So it is very, very important that the duty officer or the master has a consideration on this point, that the other vessel is actually finally passed and clear. If necessary to avoid collision or to allow more time to assess the situation, a vessel shall slacken her speed. Now, this rule is in tune with 19E, where it says that when you hear the fog signal ahead and you cannot determine if the risk of collision is there or not, you shall reduce the speed. I mean, reduction of the speed is mandatory. You cannot continue at the same speed. This is something like that. If you need more time to assess the situation, you must slacken the speed, because you are not very sure whether the situation is clear or not. Now, 8F1 says that a vessel which by any of these rules, required not to impede the passage or safe passage of another vessel shall, if the circumstances of the case admit, take early action to provide sufficient sea room. Like, let's say a fishing vessel, a vessel engaged in fishing in narrow channel. She is required not to impede the passage of any other vessel which is following the narrow channel. She has to observe a good seamanship. She has to assume a higher responsibility that there are vessels going along the course of narrow channel and they might be safe only within the narrow channel, and therefore there is a responsibility on each vessel that there should be no collision. Every vessel has to take avoiding action, right? So fishing vessel must take advance action, saying that normally they are supposed to not impede the passage. So why cause a close quarter situation and restricted visibility? Why not take early action to provide sufficient sea room? So this is what is the meaning, that when you are complying with rules of section 1, due regard must be made to the prevailing condition of restricted visibility. Narrow channel and traffic separation scheme, they don't disappear in restricted visibility. They do exist, and in fact the ships do navigate in these areas and nearby areas. What is required is these ships should observe good seamanship. They should assume a greater responsibility, and as we know that the power-driven vessel should always have engines ready to maneuver. Now let us consider a specific situation. In good visibility, when a vessel has to cross the narrow channel, Rule 9D says that a vessel, when she knows that her crossing might impede the passage or safe passage of a vessel, or passage of a vessel which can safely navigate only within the narrow channel, shall not cross the narrow channel. Now let us say in restricted visibility a vessel is crossing from starboard to port, and let us say it is a power-driven vessel, right? Now according to 19D, each vessel shall determine if a risk of collision exists and a close quarter situation is developing, and will take avoiding action. But what I am saying is, in the narrow channel, there is a possibility that the vessel following the narrow channel is safe only within the narrow channel. That means the option left with that vessel is only to reduce the speed. She cannot alter course to starboard or port, right? She is a vessel probably constrained by draft. Now, Observance of good seamanship means the crossing vessel must assume that the vessel which is following the narrow channel is safe only within the narrow channel. She must observe good seamanship and she must reduce the speed or stop so that she allows the vessel in the narrow channel to pass. That is what by which the Colreg means that when you are applying the rules of section 1, special consideration should be made to the condition of restricted visibility. Let's take another case, a vessel that is crossing the traffic separation scheme. In good visibility, it is said that she shall normally avoid crossing the traffic lane. When obliged to cross, she shall do at an angle as nearly as practicable 90 degrees to the general direction of traffic flow, which means that the vessel does not have any requirement of not impeding the passage, but she has only one requirement, one condition to fulfill, that her heading should be 90 degrees to the traffic lane. In restricted visibility, what happens? In restricted visibility, a vessel that is crossing the traffic lane must observe a good seamanship, must assume a greater responsibility that there is a vessel that is, or there are a number of vessels which are following the traffic lane. I better stop and wait for these vessels to pass if I am obliged to go in the traffic lane. Otherwise, what would happen if there is risk of collision and the alternatives are they either reduce the speed or alter course to starboard. Right? Alteration of the course to starboard can create confusion depending on the geographic situation and number of vessels in and around the lane. And when they reduce the speed, suppose both of them they reduce the speed, that is not the ultimate solution because it will delay the TCPA but not actually eliminate the problem. So one of the best things that could be done is the vessel that is crossing the lane must understand, must forethink. He must have foresight that this can happen. So I better stop, allow the vessel in the traffic separation scheme to pass, and when it is a clear situation, I enter the traffic separation scheme. Now, this is what is called, when you are following the rules of section 1, allow for the condition of restricted visibility.